Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo, and it's looking like it's just going to be a guy's night tonight, Birdman, because this is just you and me in the studio here tonight.
I know, the ladies left a story of our lives.
Yes. It looks like it's just the two of us tonight, but we can make do because we got something fun to talk about, something I've been really looking forward to. For those who are unaware, this year is not only the 30-year anniversary of the Game Boy, it is also the 15-year anniversary of the Nintendo DS. So we decided to just lump the two together and just do a typical, do a full birthday show on Nintendo Handhelds. Going to talk about their history, how they impacted the game industry, and some of our favorite games. So yeah, that's going to be fun. But of course, there is a procedure to follow, so we're going to begin by following up on our last random topic of the week. And our previous random topic was strange things that you've seen go for a lot of money, and we got a few responses here. So let's see here now. All right, and our first response here comes from Tony, and he says the weirdest thing that I have ever seen go for a lot of money, geek related, was a set of dice made from human bone. So I think that's kind of really creepy. And actually, I think didn't we discuss something like that on a previous episode?
Yeah, I
talking about like weird dice.
Yeah, something like that during the spring. They were made out of like woolly mammoth bone or something.
Okay. Let's see here now. Let's see, and here's one here from Rachel, and she says that the strangest thing that she's seen go for a lot of money was a box of Nintendo cereal that the purchaser then turned around and actually ate as soon as money changed hands. So there's cheaper ways to find out what it's like to get your stomach pumped there, buddy. Just eat a Tide Pod. Producer's note: please, for the love of God, do not eat Tide Pods.
No.
But the winner here, and this is something that'll be up your alley, Mike. This is one from Eric, and he says, my father found a pad of first edition Dungeons & Dragons character sheets that he sold on eBay for $700.
They must have been new in the shrink wrap, never used, obviously.
Well,
That's
I mean,
insane.
like a whole pad of those first edition character sheets. I mean, like, that makes a little bit of sense to me because that's a consumable item. Like, that's not something that's meant to last forever.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, being able to find those like early character sheets and stuff like that, because sometimes writing out your own sheet sucks, because you don't know where stuff goes, and having a pre-made character sheet is kind of nice. Plus, I find those accessory items, they're sold, but you don't see them around for too long, so you got to scoop them up when they're available. So the fact that this was from the first edition of D&D, I'm not surprised that it went for a ludicrous amount of money.
Okay, so those are the responses from last week's random topic of the week, and so now we're going to jump right into Ask a Geek. Question here. This one comes from Michelle, and her question is what are game releases that we're looking forward to over the rest of the year? So, Mike, why don't you go first? What are you most stoked about for the rest of 2019?
Well, because I'm a gamer, looking forward to Call of Duty Modern Warfare. That looks ridiculously fun. The alpha is just this past weekend, and the 2v2 gun mode's really fun. Also looking forward to... Let me see, what else am I really looking forward to? I guess Link's Awakening looks pretty sweet. Trying to think of big November releases, because there's always something that comes out in November that looks cool. Truth be told, I can't think of much, actually, that I'm really super stoked about this year. I'm more in the sphere of... I guess the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. That looks cool. That will get a pre-order for me for sure. Doom Eternal looks pretty kick-ass.
Yes.
So, trying to think of anything else off the top of my head. Not really. Oh, Ghostbusters Remastered. That is a must-own for me.
Nice. All right, yeah. I'd say my big three are Link's Awakening, of which I have 3 different versions on pre-order because I had to have that European special edition with the steelbook because I'm fucking crazy that way. So shout out to my buddy Neil in Ireland for hooking me up with that. Pokemon Sword and Shield because big Pokemon nut, so I'm looking forward to that. And Doom Eternal. That's probably going to be It's probably not going to be my game of the year. That's probably going to go to Fire Emblem Three Houses, but it's definitely going to be up there. It's definitely the one I'm the most stoked about over the coming months. Can't wait to smack some bitches around in Doom. That's gonna be fucking awesome. So yes. So we're going to cut Ask the Geek a little short this week because we got a lot to talk about in our discussion segment. But as always, you can send them to us through the email at drgonzo@nerdtothethirdpower.com. Love getting your questions, love reading them on the air. So go ahead and get your questions in. You just might get yours read on the show. And so with that, this year marks the 30th anniversary of Nintendo's Little Gray Brick, the Game Boy, and the 15-year anniversary of the Nintendo DS. So we thought that it'd be fun to just talk about the history of Nintendo's handhelds, how they've impacted the industry, and how at times they've actually kind of had to carry Nintendo through some rough patches. So let's go ahead and just start with, of course, the Little Gray Brick, the Game Boy, and let's kind of talk a little bit about what the gaming scene was like in 1989 and how it came to be. So, Mike, since as you pointed out, you are older than the hills themselves and can remember clearly the first star and the first breath of the wind. What was the gaming scene like in 1989 when the Game Boy came onto the scene?
Well, it was pretty fun because we had, obviously, the Nintendo, we had the Sega Genesis, and it was a good time to be a gamer, but portable gaming was pretty much relegated to the Tiger handheld electronics, and fuck those things. Nintendo had the Game & Watch that came out in 1980, and I think it was Japanese designer Gunpei Yokoi, I think that's his name.
Gunpei Yokoi, yeah.
Yeah, looked at I want a portable gaming, and he invented the Game & Watch in like 1980, seeing the success of the Sony Walkman and whatnot, figuring how to integrate that kind of tech with gaming. And it was kind of a primitive scene for like kind of handheld stuff, but I remember getting a Game Boy for Christmas that year with the North American pack-in game Tetris and being utterly blown away by it because it was so much fun. And sure, there were other handhelds that came out a little bit later, like the Atari Lynx, the Sega Game
released
Gear.
The same year, actually.
Yeah, and I didn't care for it because it's color, but it's not as fun. Plus, the battery life in those things were atrocious. Like, you could get easily 15 to 30 hours, something like that, something nuts, in the original Game Boy out of 4 AA batteries. And I remember the library being pretty extensive for the Game Boy, something like 1,000 games over its like 10 to 12 year lifespan. And it was just a magical time to have a good portable gaming system in your pocket. You could easily swap cartridges. You could carry around a bunch with you. They're great for car trips. The accessories for the Game Boy were ridiculous, like all the magnifiers for the screen. There were just some friggin' weird ones that made like your buttons huge and the directional pad bigger, ones that would make the like sound come out like something fierce. One thing I didn't realize is that it output its via the headphone jack. You could listen to games in stereo, and it didn't dawn on me until I did my research today that I was so used to hearing the Tetris theme in mono, and then I heard it played in stereo, how much that took me back to Christmas 1989 playing with those Nintendo branded headphones that came with the Game Boy at the time. And it was a really good Christmas, because that Christmas I got Super Mario Land, I got Tetris obviously, and I think I got TMNT Fall of the Foot Clan not too long after that. And I played my Game Boy pretty faithfully. I took it to high school in like 94, 95. I got one of the Play It Loud Game Boys. I gave my other Game Boy to my grandmother, and she played the shit out of that for like easily 20 years. I had the red Play It Loud Game Boy. There was like different color variations. There was like a clear one, a black one, a green one. I think there was
the clear one was a launch model. At least in the US it was. There was the gray one, and then there was the clear one. And then in the early 90s, I want to say like 94, 95, that was when they introduced the Play It Loud colors. Because the 90s were all about being extreme and loud and rebellious. I remember I actually remember very clearly when I got my Game Boy. It was actually the very first console that was actually mine, that I ever owned. That was actually mine, because the first console I ever played on was an NES that belonged to my cousin who was living with us at the time. And I remember I was 5 years old, and my dad took me to the Navy Exchange in Annapolis, and he took me and bought me my first Game Boy, and he bought me a copy of Super Mario Land 2. He bought my sister a Barbie game, which she never touched, and he got Chess Master for himself, which he also never touched because he had a hard time seeing on the Game Boy screen. And I still have that Game Boy to this day, and I still have it. It still works. And it currently sits proudly in my collection in my house, in my above door space of awesome things, on top of my Wii developers kit, next to my robotic operating buddy. But it was. I want to swing back to you mentioning Tetris being the pack-in title, and how much of a genius move that was, because the perception of video games at the time in the late 80s and early 90s was that they were basically toys. They were basically kids' toys. And Yokoi, the reason why he chose Tetris as the pack-in title is he wanted something in there that anybody could play, that could appeal to everybody, and you could position the Game Boy as being a game console for, say, the businessman on the go, or the traveler. And he mentioned in one of his interviews that he knew that he had made the right call on that when he got on a subway to work one morning and saw a bunch of Japanese salarymen playing Tetris on the Game Boy on the subway. So, and it's really kind of such a genius move to do that, because you would think, it being a Nintendo system, that the initial pack-in game would be like, a Super Mario game. But it wasn't. It was this puzzle game that anybody could pick up and play. Like, you mentioned your grandmother played it. So, I mean, it was such a genius move to do that.
I think in Japan the packing game was Super Mario Land, but yeah, you're right.
Nope, it was
really?
Tetris. It was Tetris all around the world.
I thought it was Mario Land. I guess
no, Mario Land was a launch title, but it was not the pack-in title.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it really connected people in a way that, like, gaming hadn't done in a very, very, very long time, where it spoke across generations. It wasn't just people going to the arcade and playing Frogger or Pac-Man anymore, because home entertainment had become that, home entertainment, but now portable entertainment, something that had evolved past the kind of game and watch. They needed something different and better, and obviously this spoke to everybody. Like I said, my grandmother played it. Kids at school played it. People, I remember keeping a dedicated link cable in my backpack so I could play Tetris against my friends at lunch.
Oh yeah, the link cable. Oh boy, we'll get to that in a bit. But it was such a genius move, and and again, you want to talk about battery life. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen another electronic device that has been able to match the Game Boy for its battery life. Because like you mentioned, there were other handheld systems that were released soon after the Game Boy. There was the Atari Lynx, there was the Game Gear, but I mean, like, the Game Gear took 6 AA batteries and would drain them in 2 hours, if that.
3 to 5, I think, at max.
Yeah, I don't remember the battery life on the Lynx.
Not good either.
Yeah. So, and these admittedly were more powerful systems than the Game Boy, but I mean, you got to consider, batteries back in the day, were pretty expensive. So to have to chew through 6 AA batteries in 2 hours, that was a strain on a kid's wallet. Go ahead, you're about to say something?
Oh, no, I was about to say, I remember Gunpei Yokoi wanted people to have this experience that was small, with the Game Boy being designed the way that it was. It didn't have these super powerful processors, didn't have backlit screens, so the Game Boy could fit inside a pocket. It could be powered by less batteries, as opposed, like you said, these things that require 6 AA's would kill them in at max 5 hours, and it was easier to program for as well. Like, I remember the Game Boy having a wide variety of titles. I mean, the Game Gear had, like, I think 300 titles for it, something like that. The Lynx had no third-party support, or at least remarkably little. And it never really stood a chance. The Game Boy stood strong until the late 90s. And that's a testament to how well this thing was designed.
Yeah, you want to talk about you want to talk about how well this thing was designed and how much abuse it could take. This thing was like indestructible. Like I think we all know about the famous Gulf War Game Boy on display at Nintendo World New York that actually got hit by a firebomb and is still playing Tetris.
Yeah, I thought that was amazing, just how rugged these things were.
Yeah, nowadays you throw since people play a lot of handheld games on their phones, you throw that at somebody, you're not, they're been like, well, why are you throwing a piece of paper at me? You threw a Game Boy at somebody back in the day, you meant them grievous bodily harm. you were sending somebody to the hospital.
And even when they redesigned the Game Boy with the Game Boy Pocket, they improved upon the design, making the graphics black and white, but only having it run on two AAA batteries, and it still had insane battery life.
Yeah, and on a brief note on the Game Boy Pocket, contrary to popular belief, there was actually a version of the Game Boy Pocket that was released that was backlit. It was only released in Japan and it was only available for a couple of years. But yeah, no, the Game Boy Light is a thing. So that's something I need to get for my collection. Let's talk a bit about some of the crazy ass accessories for the Game Boy. Do you remember the Handy Boy?
Was that the one where you put this exoskeleton on top of the thing or whatever?
Yeah, and it had stereo speakers, a screen magnifier, a light, and a fucking arcade style joystick on it. I actually had one of those back in the day.
Same here, yeah. So ridiculous and so unnecessary. Yeah,
I got it from my mother for Christmas. All I asked her for was the basic first party Nintendo magnifier, and she comes in with this huge ass box, this thing that basically turns. The joke that I had with a couple friend of mine was that it looked like a PKE meter from Ghostbusters.
it really did.
Yeah, and then you had the Game Boy camera and printer.
Oh, I remember the Game Boy camera and the printer. Me and my friend me and the guy I used to be friends with named Ryan used to fuck around with that thing something fierce. It was so stupid. It was so dumb.
And of course, we've already mentioned the link cable, which brings us to the crowning jewel of the Game Boy's crown, and that was the Pokemon series. Which brought the Game Boy back in a really big way in the latter half of the 90s, because it was kind of fallen by the wayside, and then Pokemon comes out and suddenly Game Boy sales just explode. Not just Game Boy sales, link cable sales. There's part of me that believes that the only reason Pokemon was released was because Nintendo had a backstock of unsold link cables that they wanted to get rid of.
It's insane to think how much Pokemon changed handheld gaming. I mean, literally, there were people buying the same game twice just to get exclusive Pokemon, or it would encourage you to trade and battle with your friends, or certain Pokemon would only evolve if they were traded. God damn, that game was light years ahead of its time. I've even got a story to go with Pokemon and Game Boy. I was playing on my Game Boy Pocket at the time, the one that ran on the two AAAs, and I was in grade 12 English class. I took the easy class because, fuck it, I only needed one particular credit to get through this year. I'm thinking, I'll just take the friggin' moron class. So we're supposed to read a book called The Lost Tire Gang. It's fucking terrible. So, because everybody in the class was a moron except me, I read the book in a class. It was only 200 pages. I read fast. So my teacher asks me all the questions that he was going to give out for the big year-end test. And he's like, well, fuck. Mike, can you sit in the back of the class and just play your Game Boy and be quiet? Yes, I can. And it's all leading to this point. So I'm playing Pokemon Red, I think it was. And I'm in the Safari Zone. One Pokemon has escaped me for fucking months. I don't know why. Tauros. I hate this fucking Pokemon. I catch one day. I almost spiked my Game Boy into the desk. I went, yes, I have you! And everybody in the room looked at me like I just shot them. They were like, what the hell are you so excited about? I got a Tauros. Mike, sit down and shut up. You got it! It was great.
Well, since we've already done a Pokemon episode, we'll go ahead and move on from there with that story. Swinging back a moment again to accessories, the Game Boy was so popular that there were actually accessories for it released for other systems. Most prominently, the Super Game Boy for the Super Nintendo, which lets you play Game Boy games on your television. And can we just talk about what a huge deal that was back in the day?
Yeah, that thing, I remember getting that for graduating one of my grades at school. I had the one that had the built-in player's guide, and I thought that was so cool, how there was custom borders, hidden animations. Hell, I didn't know this until recently. There are 2 versions of the Super Game Boy. The Japan-only one's way better. But I thought that was so friggin' cool, just being able to play Game Boy games on a big TV, hear bigger sound, because Game Boy games, despite being really limited in their memory, could have fantastic soundtracks. Castlevania Adventure being a prime example of that. Yeah.
And it also opened the Game Boy library up to people who maybe they didn't have a Game Boy. So it's like, for a while, because it was packed up, I didn't have access to my Game Boy. Because we moved around a lot when I was in the mid 90s. And you thought I'd kept the Game Boy out, but I didn't. And I had my Super Nintendo out and hooked up, and then the Super Game Boy came out, and suddenly I was able to play all my old Game Boy games. And I was able to actually, buy and play new ones. That's actually how I first started playing Pokemon. It was not on a Game Boy; it was on the Super Game Boy.
Wow.
But of course, the rule of nature of games, as in nature, is evolve or die. And of course, the Game Boy had to evolve, and it had its first major evolution in the Game Boy Color, released in 1998. And you want to talk about a mind-blowing thing, the idea of Game Boys actually having color. That made some waves back in the day.
This is a system I have little experience with because I was one of those dinosaurs that refused to evolve with it, but there were certain Game Boy carts that were compatible with both the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, which I didn't know at the time. I remember having the Mega Man X game, and it was in a black cartridge. And
yeah,
I thought, that's cool.
Those are the ones that could work on a regular Game Boy as well as the Game Boy Color, and then Game Boy Color exclusive games had a clear case that with a convex groove at the top. And they would not work on a regular Game Boy or a Super Game Boy. And you really missed out on not advancing with the Game Boy Color, because there were some dope-ass games on that system.
Yeah, it was off my radar. I mean, me in my late 90s, gaming kind of peaked. I still had a Super Nintendo. I didn't really get into the PlayStation 1 either. I decided chasing girls was more fun. Yeah, that was a mistake in hindsight.
Yeah, say that while your wife is in earshot, why don't you?
I love you, honey. Love
you. That's going to be our stinger.
Awesome.
But yeah, there's some dope-ass games on the Game Boy Color. My personal favorites being the Legend of Zelda duology, the Oracle of Ages and the Oracle of Seasons, which you could actually, if you had them both, you could actually play one contiguous story between the two of them through their password system.
That's pretty kick-ass.
Yeah. It's also the point where handheld gaming kind of sort of fell to the wayside a bit, because that was also the point where we started getting the more powerful consoles, the N64, the PlayStation, and then of course we had the GameCube later on, a couple years later. So handheld development kind of sort of fell by the wayside, because as many awesome handheld games as there was also a lot of just kind of shovelware. Like I remember the one that really disappointed me most was the Game Boy Color version of Episode 1 Racer, which I'd played that on the N64, and I thought that okay, yeah, the graphics wouldn't be as good, but it would be kind of at least similar gameplay on the go, and I was really stoked. And it turned out to be just like this one-on-one drag racing thing.
All I remember from the Game Boy Color era of games is the infinite amount of Barbie titles, Lizzie McGuire, and all these really weird Disney tie-ins.
Yeah. The Game Boy Color was a license whore for a while.
It was shovelware to the extreme. But then again, the later DS would get just as fucking bad.
Yep. But then in 2001, we had the Game Boy Advance, which was actually just, as I recall, just about as powerful, maybe even a little more powerful than a Super Nintendo. And that was where you started to see the first batch of re-releases of older games. So you saw, like, I think one of the launch titles was Super Mario Advance, which was actually a re-release of Super Mario Brothers 2. And then you had Yoshi's Island, Mario World, Mario 3. You saw re-releases of A Link to the Past. And in addition to that, you also had some kick-ass new games. And it was finally, I would say, the point where handheld gaming finally caught up to console gaming in terms of being able to provide a comparable experience.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, another handheld that I never owned, but I did have a lot of games to play on later consoles. I remember when they ported Final Fantasy 3/6, I couldn't believe I was playing that on the go. It blew my mind. And also, like you said, having those re-releases, having the classic NES series, having a having a NES and Super Nintendo-like experience on the go, I didn't think I would ever see it.
If only they could have just, made a backlit screen for that thing, because damn, you could not see a thing on those first model Game Boy Advances. They later fixed it with the SP, which has two versions, a front-lit version and then a backlit version. I can't remember, I think it's like the model 101 is the backlit version. Not sure though, I'd have to look that up. But I had a Game Boy Advance, later Game Boy Advance SP, and I got that for Christmas one year along with Metroid Fusion. And I remember being blown away by the fact that you could actually use the Game Boy Advance with some GameCube games.
I forgot about that.
Many and mighty are the tales of me and a friend of mine playing through Wind Waker on the GameCube. Me playing as Link and him controlling Tingle and dropping bombs on me and causing me trouble. And then, of course, there was Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles and Legend of Zelda Four Swords, which all use the Game Boy Advance as a not just as a controller but also as a second screen, kind of presaging things to come with the DS.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of like Metroid Fusion, I loved Super Metroid back on the Super Nintendo, and it wasn't until I picked up Metroid Fusion when I was in college, again playing this on a Nintendo DS, but I really started to appreciate some of the games that came out on the Game Boy Advance. I mean, Metroid Fusion was one of those games that instilled terror. When Samus X would sneak up on you, or you'd have to hide. And like, there's one screen, I remember Samus hides, and you just see the X looking back and forth, walking across the screen, like one floor below you, and you're just waiting for her to pass by. I remember thinking, holy crap. And I've never quite forgotten that gaming moment. That moment wouldn't be matched until Resident Evil 4 or Alien Isolation in terms of, oh shit.
Man, the moment that I remember most clearly from Fusion, again involving the SAX, there's a moment in one of the sectors where you're just kind of going down a hallway, just kind of mind your own business. You open the door, you get ready to go through and get the screen transition, and then right as you're about to go through the door, it opens and the SAX steps through and starts fucking chasing you over the next like 6 screens. Like that's up there with the SAX is up there with the Nemesis from Resident Evil 3 as like one of my most feared video game monsters, just because this thing was so unstoppable. So made finally killing it at the end quite satisfying though.
Agreed.
Yes. But of course, all good things, they have to come to an end. And the last version of the Game Boy that was released was the Game Boy Micro in 2005, which was pretty shoddy. And we moved on to the Nintendo DS, released in 2004, same year I graduated high school. And this was again just another mind-blowing moment. Here was a device that was not only a dual screen, it had a touch screen that you could mess around with, but was also about as powerful as a Nintendo 64. And I remember just looking. It was a mimetic moment for me, just watching these trailers for the Nintendo DS and seeing it playing Super Mario 64. And I was like, I can play N64 games on the go. Oh my god, what a time to be alive! Because I foolishly thought that they were going to port over like all the N64 games to the DS.
Some of those games would have been really cool, but some of them would have been really hard to see.
Yeah. So, and it's so hard to overstate just how much of an impact the Nintendo DS had, and how opening up that second screen just exploded game development, and just the wide variety of games and titles released for it. Like every time I think I've seen it all as far as DS games, there's always somebody comes up with some weird new game that I'd never heard before and never thought would ever actually happen. Like for example, puzzle and brain teaser games found new life on the DS. Like I'm a huge fan of the Professor Layton series. That got its start on the DS. You started to see excuse me. You started to see JRPGs and visual novels actually getting released in the States on the DS, like Phoenix Wright being the most famous example of those. And just such a wide variety of titles. I don't think I've ever seen a library more varied and creative than that on the Nintendo DS.
Yeah, like the Nintendo DS was a system that was very near and dear to my heart for a number of years. Actually, milestone for me, dare I say. One of the first birthdays me and my wife ever celebrated together is she gave me a red Nintendo DS for my birthday, and I had it up until last year. And one of the first titles she bought for me was the Chrono Trigger port, which had like a new ending, enhanced graphics, and all that shit. And I fell in love with the system then, just being able to play Chrono Trigger. But I also remember playing other games. I remember playing some Pokemon titles on there, Professor Layton, as you mentioned. I was a big fan of Nintendogs because, of course, I would be. One game that I don't think gets nearly enough love, but it was a game called Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, I think is what it was called.
Yeah, I remember that one.
That game was fucking cool. Plus you got Mega Man Zero on there, which was really neat.
Yeah, you got the Mega Man Zero collection on the DS because it was originally a Game Boy Advance series.
Yeah, and I thought that was really cool because I totally missed them on that generation handheld. I remember even for a time they ported the Guitar Hero games over, which they had unique controllers, unique sounds. There was even like a drum kit for it, which was really strange. But yeah, I thought that was cool. The fact that I can now play Guitar Hero portable, that was weird, that was strange, and as you would say, what a magical time to be alive.
Yeah, some looking through my collection, some of my favorite DS titles that I have in my collection. Of course, Chrono Trigger, you got to have that. The Castlevania series, I feel like, really reached its peak on the DS. You had Portrait of Ruin, Aria of Sorrow, or the Dawn of Sorrow. Which one? One of the of Sorrow games was on the DS, and Order of Ecclesia, which is my favorite DS Castlevania game. Let's see, you had the remake of Final Fantasy IV, which was great. Let's see. Of course, Professor Layton. I have all four of those on the DS. I absolutely love those games. Like one of the games that actually impacted me the most emotionally was Professor Layton in the Unwound Future. I cried like a bitch at the ending of that game. I remember that was that I got that just after I moved into my first apartment, and I remember my roommate coming home from work one night just as I'd finished this game and seeing me just like curled up in a fetal position in my recliner and wondering what the hell was wrong with me. I was like, oh, he loved her so much. And of course, you're going to talk DS, you got to talk about Professor Layton. Not Professor Layton. We just did that. Of course, you're going to talk about the DS, you got to talk about Phoenix Wright and
yes.
And those games, because oh my god, that's my first introduction to the visual novel genre, and I absolutely fell in love with Phoenix Wright, with the world, its characters, and of course I got the spinoff Miles Edgeworth, Ace Investigator. Still haven't finished it yet. Need to pick that up again.
That's the only one that I did finish. I didn't finish any of the Phoenix Wright, but I did finish Miles Edgeworth because he's such a douchebag and I loved him.
Yes. So, and then of course, after the DS, we got the 3DS in, let me pull up my notes.
2011, I want to say.
2011, yeah.
Like, I went and I pre-ordered this thing immediately. I tried the demo at PAX East, and I thought that was really, really kick-ass. Like, 3D without glasses? Okay, cool, sign me up. They wanted $250 for this thing. This thing did not sell well at launch.
No, it did not. And a lot of that is it didn't have a very strong launch lineup. Like, the only launch game that I remember off the top of my head for the 3DS was Pilot Wings.
Super Street Fighter 4, and that's what sold the system to me, was that game, because I played a shit ton of that on the Xbox 360. But yeah, so eventually Nintendo would offer an ambassador program where they would give you 20 games for the system. I think it was either 10 or 20. They'd give you some NES games, some Super Nintendo games, some Game Boy Advance games, and they were exclusive. Like, you could only get them through the ambassador program. And this is something I found about Nintendo being really, really, really cool. I owned a 3DS. I took it to MagFest, and one of the coolest things I got to experience was the Street Pass system. I thought this was the coolest thing since fucking sliced bread. Just being able to collect Mii's from your friends. Say, I'm from Ohio, I'm from Nevada, I'm from wherever, I'm from Japan. I had game passes from around the world. Thought it was the coolest thing ever, just going to all these different conventions. This was at the height of my career, and just collecting them. I thought it was so cool. However, coming back from MagFest, I lost my 3DS. I was fucking heartbroken. So somebody out there has my 3DS, and fuck you. But there's a happy ending to the story. So I wrote to Nintendo, told my Nintendo rep what had happened. Nintendo of Canada sent me a royal purple 3DS. Cool. Got that back. And I found out Nintendo doesn't advertise this fact, but they were able to restore all my purchases because I tend to get a lot of games digital. I'm not a big collector of physical stuff, which is, I know, weird. And they were able to restore all my purchases. They gave me a bunch of points, too, to download stuff. And I was happier than a pig in shit. I thought the 3DS was one of the coolest things ever. And there were so many models of this thing. Holy crap.
Yeah, there were. One of the things that we have to talk about, especially with the 3DS, is the wider state of Nintendo at the time. Because the time that the 3DS came out, Nintendo was just getting off of the Wii and coming out with the Wii U, which, as we all know, wasn't the hottest thing on the market. It sold actually pretty poorly. I think it was 14 million units over its entire lifespan. So for a while, the 3DS actually had to carry Nintendo through that console generation.
And I was so surprised that it did.
Really?
Yeah, because I always figured Nintendo would put all the resources into the console, but it just wasn't happening. It's like that line in Mean Girls. You're not going to make fetch happen. Just give it up. And the Wii U, for all its power and strength, the 3DS kicked its ass.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that by the time the 3DS came out, developers had kind of gotten comfortable with working with the dual screen setup, and the fact that the 3DS had some real power into its hood, they were able to come up with some really, really great looking games and deliver some really awesome experiences. Yeah, and I remember being really surprised at how many 3DS games were Game of the Year contenders. Like, I remember the year Bravely Default came out, fucking everybody I knew was talking about that game.
Yep.
And of course you had Pokemon on there as well. You had some really awesome Zelda games. A Link Between Worlds is still one of my absolute favorites. You had ports of Star Fox 64 3D. You had the Fire Emblem. You had a bunch of Fire Emblem games. Fire Emblem found new life on the DS and 3DS.
Luigi's Mansion Dark of the Moon is fucking amazing.
Still haven't played that yet.
Oh my god, so good.
But these were it's really no exaggeration to say without the 3DS, Nintendo probably would not be here today, because the failure of the Wii U was such that Nintendo probably would have had to throw in the towel.
Yeah, like it got so bad that there was no hardware refresh. Usually Nintendo will do a bump in its hardware for a couple of years, and with the Wii U selling like shit, they didn't do it. Yet with the 3DS, we had the 3DS XL, the new 3DS XL, the new 3DS. Like, there are multiple different versions. Plus, if you go to Japan and other places, there are so many specialty 3DSs that you can get there. Like, you could go broke just walking in the stores. There's one point, I think it's on the new 3DS XL, you can swap faceplates. Mm-hmm. And there's like 170 exclusive to Japan alone.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Like,
there are game collectors I know who they just collect 3DS systems. And there's one guy I know, he's got like 70 different ones. But
that's nuts.
Yeah, I want to talk specifically about the XL systems for both the DS and the 3DS, because if it weren't for those versions, I would not have been able to play any DS games or 3DS games, because I have, as I mentioned before, I have big meaty man hands, and like if I tried to play on like on a regular on a DS Lite or even a regular DS, like I'd have early onset arthritis. So like I got made fun of by a friend of mine when I first bought the DSi XL, and it was like, oh, you bought the checkbook. And I'm like, okay, yeah, fine. But then he was, after he'd always have to put his DS down after like 20 minutes just to stretch out his hands and his fingers. It's like, oh god, this is killing me. So I was like, well, here, try playing it on this and see how you feel after that. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to get one of these for myself now. So, and those XL versions actually got so popular that when the new 3DS was released initially in the States, that was the only version they put out, was the XL version. You can only get the smaller base model originally as like a special Pokemon edition, with I think it was Sun and Moon when it came out. So it and then you had the 2DS, which was released for like little kids, and it didn't have the clamshell design. And it really, it was almost to the point where Nintendo was able to penetrate different markets with the same handheld, because you had, the hardcore crowd could buy like the XL or the regular edition, and then the 2DS could be like an entry level console for parents to buy their kids, so that they could have something to play that they wouldn't break. And I think it was kind of just a genius move with that.
Well, one of the cool things I like about the 2DS is they took out all the expensive components, and you still got the same experience, whether you were playing Street Fighter or Star Fox or Fire Emblem or whatever, as you got on the 3DS as well. And one of the cool things, I didn't know this, but a 2DS is one solid screen, just separated with plastic. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, really? I also found the 2DS much more comfortable to hold for long periods of time. I actually had a 2DS for a long time, but I sold it a couple of years ago. I still have my 3DS XL, like the new 3DS XL. But I was so surprised that Nintendo is able to refresh the hardware and offer as many bundles as it does. I mean, I still see them showing up on people's Christmas lists. I still see people playing them in public today. That's a system that has life in it. I mean, the system is pretty much officially dead now that the Switch is going super strong, and it's got a hardware refresh coming next week or something.
Yeah, sometime in the next like month or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, no. I think the new Switch is already out with the battery life.
Oh no, I mean the Switch Lite, which can't output to a TV.
Oh yeah, the Switch Lite. Yeah, okay. I thought you were talking about the. Yeah, okay, yeah. That's coming out in late September.
Yeah.
And so I guess that brings us now to the current generation, which the Nintendo Switch, which we've already done a whole episode on. But I mean, it speaks to the versatility of the system that Nintendo is putting out a handheld only version of the system, and people are going nuts for it.
Yeah, and like there are people buying it, which blows my mind simply because I want my Switch to output to a TV, but there are people buying it purely for the portable experience, and that to me is amazing. Nintendo's been able to do that. People are doing that. I don't get it. That's cool if you want to spend your money like that. But
well, it's the first time that we've had a truly equal experience between a console experience and a handheld experience. Because
yes,
previously up to this point, I mean, handhelds were always a generation or two behind the consoles, but now we have a handheld that's actually able to keep up with the Joneses, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, it's astounding just to think. If I want to play, with the exception of a few games that require the motion controls, like Breath of the Wild, if I want to play Alien Isolation on the subway, I can do that. I want to play like all these fantastic Switch titles and not be tethered to a TV. I can do that. That's amazing. Nintendo has proven to be one of the most innovative companies in gaming since forever, and they've never really slowed down. They've had some dark times here and there, but they've never given up, and that really impresses me.
Yep. And looking at this note here, can you guess what going back to the 3DS for what? Can you guess what the best-selling 3DS game of all time is?
Pokemon X?
Nope.
What?
Mario Kart 7 at 16.76 million units.
Wow.
Yep. So we're kind of we still got a little bit left of the show. So let's talk about, we've talked about the systems. So let's talk about the games. What are some of your favorite Game Boy and DS games?
Game Boy, TMNT Fall of the Foot Clan, because you can beat that thing in 20 minutes and it's still fun. Pokemon Red and Blue, that goes without saying. I'm trying to think of other titles people may have never heard of. The Contra titles were surprisingly solid. Castlevania Adventures 1 and 2 were pretty good. DS titles, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective I really liked. The World Ends With You, I think is what that game was called. That's really awesome. The Chrono Trigger remake is essential. One game that does not get enough recognition because it was supposed to be a companion game to Aliens Colonial Marines was a game called Aliens Infestation. Really underrated. If you can find it, pick it up. And I'm trying to think of what else. Nintendogs is fun because why the hell wouldn't it be? And
man, I got a story about Nintendogs. So
okay.
when the DS was released, I was dating this girl, and we took her little sister out for her birthday to I can't remember exactly where. I think we went. We were going to the Maryland Science Center up in Baltimore. That's right. And we were taking the light rail up to Baltimore to go to the Science Center. And my girlfriend's little sister has her DS, and she's playing Nintendogs. And she's trying to one of the things you could do with it was you could use the DS microphone to call its name and have it come to you. Well, the DS, the DS microphone, the microphone on her DS, I guess, was being a little finicky. So she's practically shouting into this DS on this crowded train. And me and my girlfriend are just kind of sitting there, just like, oh god, okay, this is kind of embarrassing. So we told her that she had to play Pokemon on the way back. So yeah, that was a bit of a thing. Let's see, favorite Game Boy games of mine. Actually, the first game I ever beat on my own was a Game Boy game, and it was the original Kirby's Dream Land. And I wish I still had that game, but I lent it out to my sister with my Game Boy for a school trip that she was taking, and she wound up losing it.
Aww.
Came back with the Game Boy, lost the game. So, and then of course, Link's Awakening is one of my favorite Game Boy games of all time. Cannot wait for the Switch version, but I still have my original Game Boy copy, and I also have the DX version released for the Game Boy Color. Pokemon, of course, I've played every generation of Pokemon games, so gotta have that. Let's see, Mario Land. The Mario Land series will always have a special place in my heart, just for it being the first games that I've had that that were actually mine. Excuse me. As far as Game Boy Advance games, Metroid Fusion is one of my favorite. I have the whole series of the Final Fantasy re-releases for the Game Boy Advance. 6 is still my absolute favorite. Let's see. Golden Sun I have, but I need to pick it up again because I remember that being just a really fun little RPG. So I need to pick that up again. Let's see. And then DS games, I will always forever shout the praises of Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright for their story writing, some of the best writing I've ever seen in gaming. The Castlevania series, again, really hit its peak. Portrait of Ruin and Order of Ecclesia are my two favorites there. Let's see, 3DS. I would say no 3DS. No 3DS owner should be allowed to walk this earth without, again, the Professor Layton games. Let's see what else. Star Fox 64 DS. I'll flip that out and I'll just play it just to screw around. It's the ultimate. God, until you've played Star Fox 64 on the DS, you really don't appreciate how easy it is to just pick up and play that game and then just put it down again. It's just a really nice time waster.
And it's great 3D too.
Oh yeah, the 3D effects on Star Fox 64 are amazing. Let's see now. God, what was another 3DS game that really
One that really impressed me because it was a launch title was Super Street Fighter 4. If you want a great fighter on the go, that plus we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Smash Brothers on the 3DS, which still gets played today.
Oh yeah, Smash Brothers on 3DS. I don't have that, but that blew my mind that they were able to get Smash Brothers running on the 3DS. And actually could work cross-play with the Wii U version.
Weird story about that. I was on a trip to Las Vegas when Smash Brothers came out. It was the trip that I won from NOS energy drinks. And I remember asking my rep, who was showing me around Las Vegas at the time, like, okay, really weird. I need to get the Wi-Fi. And they're like, why? You're supposed to be on vacation. You get to hang out with George St. Pierre, some USC fighter guy. I'm thinking, yeah, that's cool and all, but the Smash Brothers demo's out. So can you help me? So this $10,000 trip to Las Vegas, here is all your expenses paid. I want to play Smash Brothers.
Hey man, no shame. I'd have been right there with you. So, and finally, one thing I want to talk about is sort of just the cultural impact, specifically of the Game Boy itself. You know, there are games that signify, you know, kind of portions of our lives. There might be a game like is emblematic of childhood and the nostalgia associated with. And I can't think of any system that's more emblematic of, you know, growing up and being a kid, at least for me, than the Game Boy. I mean, it was such a cultural force. You know, even people who didn't know anything about video games, they knew what the Game Boy was and what it could do, and it was such a cultural force back then. It's I don't think I've ever seen a handheld have that much impact outside the gaming sphere ever. And just how this thing was, like, you look at a Game Boy and it's one of those things you look at and it just says 90s. It sums up the years that it was active so well, just in that little shell. Especially if you get one of the neon colored ones that came out in the 90s. Oh my god, I still remember those commercials for the Play It Loud Game Boy Pockets, where they had the Game Boys going on the assembly line, and they'd get, you know, mashed up with a hammer into a little cube and then flattened out, and then the colors were put in by it being shot with a paintball gun.
Yep, I remember those as well.
Yeah.
I remember the thing that I think will always stick well with me the most about the Game Boy and its cultural impact is it gave me and my grandmother a common ground. She could play Super Mario Brothers with me and it would be okay. She could beat it. She was better at it than me. But she would take my Game Boy when I wasn't around and just play Tetris. And she got to a point she could easily get to level 120 or whatever. Like, once you got past level 9, I was like, fuck this, I'm done. But she could think that fast. She could react that fast. I think that's why she didn't have much arthritis in her hands. She kept exercising them. And it was just so cool to see her, even in her later years, she kept my Game Boy at home and would still play Tetris when I wasn't there. That's a conversation I never thought I'd have with my grandmother when she was in her late 80s. Are you still playing Tetris? Oh, yeah. Wow, that's incredible. And you're a woman who does not understand technology whatsoever.
Oh yeah, it's just, and again, that speaks to just that genius move by Yokoi to make that the pack-in title, because as you've shown with your story, I mean, Tetris is one of those games like anybody can pick up and play it, and the Game Boy was the first console that was really able to speak to everybody, like no matter who you were, there was something on there that you could find and enjoy. Like, you know, literally the only reason that my dad almost never touched his Chessmaster game was because he just had a hard time seeing on that green screen. But I mean, he picked it up and he enjoyed it when he was able to play it. And it's one of those things that just, again, it's, you know, I've talked before about my father and how he never really understood my fascination with gaming. But like, I remember just being a kid and seeing him sitting in his easy chair with the Game Boy playing Chessmaster and just marveling at the sight of my father playing video games. And for me particularly, you know, the Game Boy has a lot of sentimental value because, as I mentioned, it's the first console that was really mine, and the fact that it was a gift from my dad. I mean, it really, my father really is the reason why I am so into gaming as I am today, because he was the one who kickstarted by buying me that Game Boy. And when I moved into the house that I'm in now, and I set up my above door space of awesome things. The first time he came over to see me in my new house, you know, I pointed up to the Game Boy up on that shelf and said, "Hey, Dad, you see anything familiar up there?" And he was like, "Just the Game Boy." And I was like, "Yeah, that's not just any Game Boy. That's the Game Boy you bought me when I was 5. I still have it. It still works." And you know, it's. You know, I really got to say thanks, Dad, for getting me started, because you whether you knew it or not, you introduced me to a hobby that has brought me so much joy and excitement over my 32 years of life just by buying me that Game Boy. So, yeah, thanks, Dad.
I'm glad for the Game Boy myself, as, like I said, it contributed to conversations between my grandmother and I, but it cemented a lot of friendships. Me and my friend Jared would play Tetris during lunch. Me and my friend Ryan would play Pokemon. I remember traveling across we skipped school one day. We skipped school to go to Toys R Us to get Mew at Toys R Us. When they were exclusive, you could only go to Toys R Us and they'd give you the download for Mew. And I think that started me off on a path of gaming that I'm still very well on to this very day.
Yeah. So it is so hard to overstate the impact the Game Boy had in gaming culture, and I would dare say without it, there wouldn't be any handheld gaming, because as we mentioned at the start of the show, the Lynx, the Game Gear, those all got released because just to compete with the Game Boy.
Yeah, I mean, who the hell remembers these systems except enthusiasts? You can show people what a game. You show them a Game Boy, 9 out of 10 of them will be able to tell you what it is. You show them a Game Gear, they're like, "What the hell's that?" Hell, I would love to see someone, if you put all the portable systems together, they'll identify the Game Boy. You might get the odd person who gets a Game Gear. No one knows what a Lynx is. Nobody knows what a Turbo Express is. So, cultural penetration, man. Balls deep.
Well, hello there. All right. But yeah, that's about all the time that we have for Nerd of the Third Power this week. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. We will see you guys in 2 weeks. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm Mike the Birdman Dodd.
All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Taka, play us out.